Welcome to Moments with Marianne. I'm so delighted we're spending this time here today. We have a very inspiring show coming right up with special guests Gary-Mantz and Suzanne-Mitchell of the Mantz-and-Mitchell radio show. And they're here today to share with us life as a radio show host. So let's welcome to the show Gary-Mantz and Suzanne-Mitchell.
Marianne, how are you doing today?
Oh, fabulous. How about you, Suzanne? I can hear Gary.
We're in the middle of a big rainstorm, but I'm feeling pretty buoyant today.
And don't let that tornado warning in our neighborhood trouble you in the slightest.
Well, if the line...
We're here. We're mic'd up. We're ready to go. What? Me worry?
You guys never worry. Come on. So if the lines go blank, we know you had to run for shelter. So we're okay with that. So.
I can't imagine why you would be okay with that. Do you think we're okay with that? Where's your empathy, woman? You guys blow away in a tornado and you're found in a farm, some pasture 20 miles away. I'm okay with that.
Well, I'm sure you guys are going to be just fine. Otherwise, I would never have said that.
No, that's okay. You told us this interview was going to be organic. Well, we deliver.
Hey, you sure do, without a doubt. Well, and it kind of has me wondering, I'm so glad that we're spending this time because usually, you don't really get the behind the scenes kind of, interviews and what's going on. So why don't we start just, I guess, from the beginning? Like, what even got you into radio?
To tell you the truth, Marianne, I drugged Suzanne at first kicking and screaming, and then she got natural with it, more and more comfortable, and now she approaches it with something like enthusiasm. But for myself, I had wanted to be a radio broadcaster going back to about age 16. I participated and won at the local level a speech contest. And I also was inspired by the great Vin Scully, still with us at past 90 years of age, who was the play-by-play announcer for the Los Angeles Dodgers for about 63 years. And when I would listen to him broadcast games, I thought, man, would I love to sound smooth as silk on the radio like that guy. And I began a series of detours, to be honest with you. So I was well into middle age by the time I actually met somebody who could get me into the radio world, get my foot in the door. And I said yes, and I did that largely by observing the law of attraction and visualizing and mentally accepting that as my best and highest good, and it took off from there.
Not surprised, knowing you. So, Suzanne, what would you like to add to that?
I came at radio from a very strange direction. My mother had a radio show, if you can believe this, when she was a teenager. She used to give advice and tips on air to teens back in Chicago, and that would have been, about 1,000 years ago. And then my grandfather owned a radio shop, if you can believe that. He used to sell radios back in the 1930s and 1940s, and he had a little shop in Chicago selling radio. And then in college, I actually met a news broadcaster, and we dated for a while. And so I knew radio from dating him. And so it was a long stretch before I met Gary, but obviously when I met him, he has this beautiful radio voice. I used to tell him he had the dulcet tones of a radio man. And when we finally had the opportunity to get on air ourselves, I was the silent partner. I did the production work, the behind-the-scenes work, the emailing and sending out of the audio and booking guests and doing things behind the scenes while Gary was the front man. And then he said, I want you to do just a little segment on air, just a little segment. And of course, I was very, very nervous. And I did come on and I told unusual stories that I found in the newspaper. And as it turns out, I became more comfortable and the listeners seemed to like it. They said, we like when the two of you talk together and you talk to each other and you both interview. And so as that progressed, then it went from being the Gary-Mantz show to Mantz-and-Mitchell. And so we've been doing this now 12 years.
Oh my goodness. Time flies when you're having fun. I've known the both of you as the Mantz-and-Mitchell show, and it's such a beautiful excuse me, way to hear this story of the two of you coming together. And with that, I'm kind of wondering, so did you meet Gary through the radio connections? Where did you guys meet?
We met at a religious science church in Seattle, one of the largest churches in Seattle for religious science. And I moved from Florida after being in Florida for 15 years. I moved out to Seattle, and the way I tell the story, Marianne, I met him practically when I crossed the Washington state line. It was shortly after I moved there. I moved there in April, and I think we met in May or June, and we were kind of dancing around each other very casually, just saying hello up until 9/11, and then we actually started dating after 9/11.
And kind of took it from there. Well, it's interesting just to see how things have, for the two of you, have progressed, and especially since you have this kind of, this background of being in radio for both of you, and then to come together for your great show, which I listen to and I love hearing you guys interview people. And so it's nice to see these two talents come together.
Well, it definitely has felt like a synergy for quite some time. Suzanne started out producing my show, and she would get on air occasionally. And then I thought, we really need to be Mantz-and-Mitchell, take to the airwaves and let our energies blend. And it's worked pretty well, at least judging by the reviews that we get. It's a lot of fun, and I would like to say that where we broadcast, which is in Seattle, 1150 KKNW, is a treasure because it has a body, mind, spirit format that is seasoned enough. They've been on the air almost 20 years. And that format is rare in our country. I can tell you, Marianne, that I have gone north through the Carolinas all the way up to upstate New York. I have crossed the country with Suzanne diagonally, pretty much, there to get to Seattle. Big road trip a couple of years ago. And when you get to the flyover stage, you get to the heartland, as they call it, you don't have a whole lot of choices, especially with AM radio. You got your FM, whatever flavor of country music you prefer. But when it comes to AM radio, it's pretty much the news stations and right-wing radio. So if you want to have that kind of entertainment, and I don't, then it's available just about anywhere. But if you want something that is uplifting, something that's going to give you inspiration to live your life in a different and hopefully better way, that's hard to come by. It's a shame, but it's the truth.
Isn't that the truth? And so for those folks that are living in those areas, you got to pick up and move closer to Seattle in order to get that radio show.
Hey, come on up. The rents are cheap. It's easy. It used to be Seattle was known for lower than average rents and some of the cheapest power bills because of hydroelectric power through Seattle City Light. Legendary for their low power bills. All of that has changed. It's just amazing. I was told back in the mid-'90s by somebody who appraises real estate, especially multi-housing apartment real estate. He said, you watch. There's going to come a time when Seattle is not going to be far behind San Francisco in pricing. The cost of living is going to skyrocket and keep going from there. Well, he was right.
He really had a way of telling the future there, because that is so true. And aside from it getting a lot of rain and being very lush and green, the people can pick up your radio show out that way. Well, and so why don't we talk about your show a little bit here? So why don't you guys share with us, what are some of the most memorable guests that you've interviewed?
Our format has changed over the last 12 years, Marianne. We started out with a show about negotiation. It was Give and Take with Gary-Mantz. And then we decided we wanted to have an evening show on the weekend that was going to be more spooky. So we started talking to ghost hunters and UFO people on a Sunday night. We've kind of moved around a little bit. And with the moves and also just with our interests, the format has changed, kind of evolved, I would say, from moving from one thing to another. when we thought we would concentrate on perhaps doing a show that had a lot of UFOs in it, we were suddenly inundated with a lot of psychic mediums. And so when that happened, that was a turn that we took. But we always kept in mind that we wanted to make people's lives better here and now. And so we have interviewed a lot of people that you would find in the self-help section of the bookstore. And in addition to paranormal and self-help, we also got connected with quite a few publicists who sent us some pretty wonderful people. And along with that, we got connected with some celebrities as well. And so we have had the opportunity to interview people like a Tippi Hedren or a Dee Wallace or an Anson Williams. And it's kind of a long list of people that we've talked to celebrity-wise.
Even Mrs. Cunningham.
And right, we talked to Marion Ross. We've talked to Tony Tennille. Quite a few people, and that's been interesting to see what some of the movie stars and some of the television celebrities have done since they left their famous movies and their famous TV shows, the other interests that they've taken up.
Yeah, I'm so glad that you guys have moved in that direction and have that just interest there, because it really has provided some great insight into some people we probably would never have.
Oh, definitely.
We interviewed Elvira, the mistress of the dark.
Cassandra Peterson.
And when we talked to her, she was all about the law of attraction, and she told us some fabulous stories about how she was visualizing things and how they all came about, including an interesting neighbor.
Oh, yes, absolutely. Her neighbor's place was up for sale, and just because Cassandra Peterson, the actual name of the stage persona Elvira, was working with the law of attraction. She went to a religious science church, a huge one in L.A., and she thought, being in this business, there are some people I would love to meet. I admire them so much, or I like them a great deal. And one of them was Brad Pitt. Well, that's not hard to understand. So she just saw herself. She did some visualization and some affirming that Brad Pitt and she would be in the same place at the same time. That was going to happen. And she just made a decision that would happen. There was nobody to introduce her. She just had that picture. Now, that's really stepping out on that skinny branch, as metaphysical types like to say. So her neighbor's place was up for sale. Wonderful mansion. And she was asked if you could keep an eye out, because there are going to be people who come to see the place, if you wouldn't mind, because we're going to be out of town. And she said, sure, no problem. They can just ring me at the gate and I can go let them in. I guess there was a lockbox. So she's just tending her business one day, and there's an intercom beep, and she says, "Hi, who is it?" And this gentleman's voice said, "Hi, I'm Brad Pitt. I would like to go and take a look next door. There's a house for sale, and I was told I could get in by you. You have a key or something?" And she said, "Yeah, right. Okay, you got me. That's fine. I don't know which one of my friends you are who put you up to this, but tell them the joke didn't work. It fell flat. Nah. And she hung up. Ring back. "No, this really is Brad Pitt. I'm interested in seeing the house next door, please. I'd like to buy it. It looks perfect for me. Can I go tour it?" And she steps outside, goes down her driveway. Damn if that isn't Brad Pitt staring at her. So she took him next door, showed him the place. I believe he bought it. And that's how she met Brad Pitt. She just decided that she would create the circumstances, and with that central idea, which was very much a turn on for her, and this is what happens in life, this is the lesson. We're not all going to meet Brad Pitt, but you can have a central idea, and then the circumstances and conditions of your life will coalesce around that central idea, that dream, if you will. And it worked for her many different times.
I love that. That is such a great story. And then to have Brad Pitt as your neighbor on top of it, you got to love that.
Right, which was for a short time, and then she moved, but it happened. I mean, that counts as a win.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I know that the both of you are really, you really follow the law of attraction. In what ways have you used that in your show?
In my show, it's interesting, Marianne, because I don't feel like I have used it as intently as I would have preferred when it comes to the show, because I tend to get caught up in the technicalities. Mm-hmm. So that's on me to fix that. It would be great to actually step back, to have enough detachment that I could use the law of attraction in deciding where to go from here. That's something for 2019. Let's make a note, Suzanne. We need to do that. When it comes to the law of attraction, the whole idea of being on the radio was something that I was over 45 years old when I started to take this idea seriously once again, instead of it being a boyhood dream. And people came into my life through the church, once again, where the law of attraction is regularly taught and practiced. And I had the opportunity to do quite a bit of public speaking at the church, and I came to the attention of a couple of men in the radio profession, and they asked me, which station do you work at? I said, none right now, but if you've got one handy, I'm available. And it really was an opportunity then to get my foot in the door, and KKNW just seemed like the perfect fit when that came along after a couple of years. That's the law of attraction.
Mm-hmm. Well, and Gary, I mean, you've got such a unique background as well. I mean, because you graduated from Cal State Fullerton with a degree in religious studies, and then you went on and did some additional education in Las Vegas.
Las Vegas is an education, yes, absolutely. I went to the University of Nevada, Las Vegas, home of the Runnin' Rebels, and back when that was a thing, and people say Las Vegas has a university. I mean, what, do you have slot machines in the classroom? And I go, yeah. And every lecture has a 2-drink minimum too. Yeah, but Las Vegas actually, the university has grown and grown over the last few decades to the point where it's a massive campus. You can get lost in there. If you went to school back in the day and you go there now, it's like you've fallen down through the rabbit hole. Where am I? It's amazing. Bottom line, I got some mass media experience, took the coursework, did some writing. I think I was the oldest cub reporter on their student newspaper, but I had some very interesting experiences with that, including being able to write an article about the 25th anniversary of the assassination of President Kennedy. And I wanted to solicit opinions from everybody from the president of the college to various professors and students who were old enough to remember. And it was really, I'm proud of that article because it became like an artifact, people's memories. That was the kind of thing that no one could ever forget if you lived through it, and everybody had their own private way of remembering it. So experiences like that built my confidence, and I thought it was worth going to UNLV and studying journalism because I wanted some nuts and bolts experience.
One of my favorite stories that Gary has told me is a little bit earlier in time when he was still living in California, and he had an opportunity to be on air in Los Angeles, and as it happened, it was on a very inauspicious day.
Oh, I was filling in for the morning news guy. I was nervous as hell, too. And I had to discuss the aftermath, not the announcement of, but like the day after Elvis died. That was my first time on the radio, and I just got through it as best I could. But I mean, I was super nervous because I mean, this is a momentous shock there, and just being in the newsroom, being around people in radio, I thought, I don't have a ton of confidence right now, but I have the natural ability, and I need to hone it. And I knew that I could function in that environment. That was a very important self-revelation.
Well, how interesting. I mean, you look at that and you're hearing these things that are happening, and here you are in this place and time doing the announcement of this. I mean, it must have felt kind of a little bit overwhelming.
It did. I'll tell you, Marianne, when you get into probably any profession, because one of the things I like to joke about is that no matter which job you have, people around you are going to tell you, why don't you do something different? This is such a dog-eat-dog business. This is a cutthroat business. And I hear it no matter what I've done. I managed apartments for 13 years, and I was hearing, it's a cutthroat, dog-eat-dog. Geez, there's got to be a better way. I'd rather be an undertaker. And you go, okay, yes, it is tough. and you move on to the next job or career, and you find that the same applies. When you get into radio, the same applies to the extent that if it's not going well for you at that station, you can come in to do your show or your shift on a Friday, and at the end of your shift, they call you into the office and tell you to clean out your desk. I mean, it's just like that. And so if you can accept that degree of harshness or heartlessness, as one of my old colleagues used to say, then you can work in that aspect of what we call show business. It's okay to do anything you want in life as long as you don't think that everything is going to be a primrose path, because as far as I can tell, a primrose path has to be planted and experienced in your own backyard. Out in the world, it doesn't work so well.
And roses do have thorns,
And you're going to feel them too.
Mm-hmm. Without a doubt. Well, and, it's interesting, Suzanne, when we look at your background, I mean, my goodness, you have a degree in English literature and also public relations.
Just like Gary, it actually came back in middle age to really assist me, because when you graduate with English literature degree, there's a lot of eye rolling that goes on. Well, how do you expect to make a living in that? I intended to do editing and writing out of college, and when I got out of college, it was during the time of the paper strike that was going on, where they weren't cutting down the trees and making paper, and you could go into the grocery store and find empty shelves. So it was hard to find even paper towels or toilet paper, much less a career that was going to be in publishing. And so I went on to do other things, just like Gary went on to do other things. And then later in life, I landed a job where they really wanted somebody to look at all of the written things that were going out of this insurance company. And they said, since everybody seems to do a lot of writing, what we don't have the right synergy going on. You have many different departments that are all saying something a little bit different, and they're all correct, but they're all looking at it from their point of view. He said we need to have a single focus. And so I developed a really nice job in public relations and communications at a regional insurance company, where suddenly everything that I learned back in college came right up to the forefront. And I was really happy to be able to use that, because you could spend a decade or two wondering why the heck you had that for a major. And then as it turns out, it really did serve me well. And I got published and wrote a number of things. I edited a very large book. And so that got me to doing editing and publishing. And when I went to Seattle, one of the jobs that I had there was an absolutely wonderful, wonderful job that had to do with writing for a mortgage lender. And in that, I won a national award for the best newsletter. And so I've got that little trophy to call my own. So it's funny how in both Gary's case and my case, there was this period of gestation before we really got into the things that we do well.
Well, I'm glad that you guys are doing what you're doing, because I'm a big fan of your show. Love the work that the both of you are doing. And Suzanne, a little bird told me that you also have the voice of an angel. You do some singing.
Oh, well, they lied.
It's not true. You do some singing. I hear you in the shower.
I was, when I met Gary, and I had just newly arrived in Seattle, I went to the Religious Science Church in the area, Center for Spiritual Living, Seattle. And over that summer, they were doing a summer choir light. Just come and sing and have fun. And I said, well, that wouldn't do any harm. So I did that, and I really enjoyed it. My very first summer in Seattle, I had an opportunity to sing with a nice group of people. When the fall came and the whole choir was coming back together again, I figured that would be my time to step back. And the assistant to the choir director said, well, I hope you're going to stay on. And I kind of blinked twice. And me? Okay. And so I stayed on for 9 years, and it was a wonderful experience in that I really learned how to develop a singing voice. And Marianne, when they talk about things like being a musical prodigy or or a psychic. Some people are born that way, and some people have to learn to play piano. And in my case, I was not born with that ability, but being in choir for 9 years and getting weekly instruction and weekly practice and being on stage and touring around with a choir, it actually did develop my voice. But what I will say now is it's been 9 years since I've sung. So I no longer have the voice I used to have because I just didn't keep it up. But it was one of the best experiences of my life to be able to do that. It was very healing. When I hear about sound and vibration and the healing of music, I really do understand that, because those notes and those sounds really do a lot to help people physically, mentally, and emotionally.
Isn't that the truth? I mean, there's nothing like hearing a live choir sing something just absolutely beautiful. It just kind of takes all worry away and really gets people into that place where they can have that healing.
Yes, and the choir itself, we used to gift to each other a CD of our songs that we sung during the year. It wasn't for publication. We didn't sell it. There were some CDs that were sold studio quality, where we were with some very nice famous singers, and so there was that. But then the choir did something just for itself. It gathered all its music for the year, and at our annual Christmas party, everybody got a CD of the songs that were sung in that particular year. So I have 8 or 9 years worth of these CDs, and I love to play them. And Gary knows I'll put that on in the car, and I'll just listen to choir music when I'm driving around, because it was such a good time for me. It was such a wonderful time in my life, and I like hearing it again. It was really beautiful music.
And the quality was extraordinary. Also, I should mention that it's wonderful that that recording was made and all the time and expense that went into the creation of it, because at least 2 people I can think of who are in that choir with you are no longer with us, but you get to hear them in their beautiful voices. That's
true. We had some individuals who did some singing in front of the choir where they were leading songs, or they had very nice solo roles, and I do get to hear them even though they're no longer here. So it is a wonderful keepsake.
What a gift that is, my goodness. And so what I'm kind of hearing also, there might be some CDs of you singing on the black market, you know?
Only in a group, Marianne. Only in a group.
I love that. I would love to start the black market choir. I think that would be really high, just sort of gangsterish, you know?
Now that'd be something I would buy the CD on. Oh my goodness. Well, on that note, we're going to pause here for a quick break. We've been speaking with Gary Mantz and Suzanne-Mitchell of the Mantz-and-Mitchell radio show. You've been listening to Moments with Marianne. We'll be right back after these messages.
Internationally recognized and award-winning author Judy Goodman works and teaches outside the box of limited thinking. Working with people from every walk of life, her goal is to empower you to be the best you can be, no matter what the challenge is. Born with the gift of seeing beyond our normal vision, she has an extraordinary gift of working with every challenge. Teaching beyond conventional wisdom, her work is described as life-changing. Visit judygoodman.com. That's judygoodman.com.
There comes a moment when you realize you're somewhere special, when you discover that each beautiful creature that you see has been rescued from a life of absolute horror and brought to this incredibly free place. Here's where their lives were forever changed, and where yours will as well. Discover over 500 tigers, bears, and lions at the brand new visitor center at the Wild Animal Sanctuary just outside Denver. For more information, visit wildanimalsanctuary.org. Discover true freedom at the Wild Animal Sanctuary.
Have you ever had the sense that your thoughts might actually be doing something? Ancient secrets of manifesting have been masterfully revealed in the award-winning book Manifesting 123 by Ken Elliott. For the first time, the author's experiences and stories in this book describe exactly how your thoughts can create anything. You've been doing this all your life, but it's never been fully explained for you until now. Visit manifesting123.com for more information today. Manifesting123.com.
There are nearly 2 million Americans living with amputation. Many live right here in San Antonio. Becoming an amputee can be scary, frustrating, isolating, but there's no reason to feel alone. The San Antonio Amputee Foundation is here to help support you and guide you toward resources such as home and car modifications and even prosthetic limbs. For more information or to make a donation, visit saamputee.org. We'll help you live a full, active life, one step at a time. San Antonio Amputee Foundation, healing limbs, hearts, and souls.
Welcome back to Moments with Marianne. We're here today with special guests Gary Mantz and Suzanne-Mitchell of the Mantz-and-Mitchell radio show. They're sharing with us life as a radio show host. Now, one of the questions I have for the two of you, you both have this just amazing skill set that dovetails so nicely together. How do you go about choosing the right guests for your radio show?
We've actually divided the work pretty well over the years as to who does what. I'm much more technically oriented than Gary, and I'm no good, by the way, but I can figure out how to do things technically, and I can bring up the audio, put it on the computer. If I need to edit it, I can do that, although I don't do much of it, but I know how to do that. And I send out the audio to our guests and thank them for being on. And I'll send a confirmation, an email confirmation that says, this is when we have you scheduled and here's all the telephone numbers. So I've always been comfortable more with things than with people. And with Gary, he does the scheduling. We'll talk about it and we'll run by some names. But he'll get on the phone, and between the two of us, he is our people person. So he can invite somebody on our show for an hour and a half on the telephone, and get to know everything about them, where they went to school, their dog's name, where their kids went to school. I mean, everything about them, what they did when they were 5 years old. He really gets into people's lives in depth. When I'm making the call, I'm off in 2 minutes. Are you available on Saturday? Okay, great. Thanks. See you then. I'm just cut and dry, A to B. But Gary he's into relationships, and he's into making friends, and he's into getting to know people. He wants to do it not on a surface level, but on a very deep connective level. And so in the radio business, he does the scheduling. I send out the emails, and between the two of us, we have it pretty well divided and don't step on each other too much.
Well, that sounds like a perfect combination, and I would agree with you. I mean, Gary is a people person. I get, as a literary publicist as well, I've sent some clients to you that you both have had the opportunity to interview, and they come back with glowing reports about the two of you.
Well, I'm very happy to hear
you.
that. You brought up something for me, Marianne. Let me get on a little byway here with you. Maybe you've had a similar experience. When you like people, I don't know when this got started. I mean, when did the clock begin for this attitude that I hear about and read of quite frequently these days? It's the phrase people pleaser. It gets under my skin, I must admit to you. If you like people, if you want to be in service in some way, if you like getting along, some people, hardly all, but some will say, oh, you sound like a people pleaser. Or they will say it behind your back. Oh, he or she is a people pleaser. Okay, well, let's see. If we're talking about harmonious interactions between human beings, yes, I am a people pleaser in terms of my intent. But what they really mean is that nobody can be that nice. That's too good to be true. They're probably manipulative. They probably want something from you. What I'd like is to have a healthy human relationship there. But that somehow makes you a people pleaser. And it seems to be one of those criticisms du jour. It's a way of negatively, pejoratively referring to people who are working on their relationships. I don't like it, and I want it to stop right now.
I would agree with you. Do you know, and this is something I can talk about as well easily, because when we look at, number one, when we have people that are gossiping, that's always a thing that really doesn't define us. The person that they're gossiping about really defines them and their limitations. But when we look at the whole concept of people pleaser, I mean, nowadays we have people that can't even connect. I mean, they don't know how. We've got generations that are used to using iPhones as a way of connecting with people, and they don't really understand what true connection's all about.
Truer words were never spoken. I can remember being in a suburb of Seattle, Tukwila, Washington, close by the airport, and I went to a Starbucks because they have them there, you know. We went to a Starbucks with a friend, and we were lining up to get our orders, and I looked over to my right, and there at a table sat a young couple, and by their behavior, they came in holding hands, and so they're holding their hands and also carrying their iPhone and BlackBerry. And so they got their coffee, and they sat down at a table for two. I guess it was a coffee date for them. And immediately, they've got those phones working. You know how your thumbs are smoking from all the typing that you're doing there. And they were in separate worlds together as a young couple. And I thought, if this is the future of dating in our society or in the world, we're in trouble. We're going to have a precipitous drop in population growth. It won't be crowded on the freeways anymore after a while, because they were each in their own world, but together in this social place, the Starbucks. And I thought, that just doesn't look healthy to me. That's absenting yourself from the person with whom you could be communicating to whatever degree of intimacy right then and there.
Mm. You know, I would agree with you. I mean, recently I went to Liberty Island, where the Statue of Liberty is at, with a friend. And so, you know, it's like girls trip in New York. So that's one of the places I'm stopping at because I haven't been there before. And it was surreal. We get off the boat and people are lining up, taking selfies and pictures of the other people. There was absolutely no discussion going on throughout the entire thing. I should have taken a picture of the people taking pictures. I mean, you couldn't walk because there were so many people around taking selfies or taking pictures. And it didn't really feel like there was this connection with the place that they were in. And it was very interesting to me as I was standing there watching this. I mean, no one was looking around. They're all trying to pose for the great shot that they're going to Instagram or put on social media. But it was a large disconnect with where they actually were. It was a little different.
Yes, and I see it everywhere I go as well. It's definitely a strange new world that we're living in. And I guess at my age, because I'm in my 60s now, and I look at it and I go, I believe that I chose, because I tend to take the metaphysical view of life. This has been true of Suzanne and myself since we met, actually. I think that we choose the time we're going to come into the world, and then we adapt, because the more things change, the more they stay the same in terms of basic dynamics of living, basic issues that we all must face. But the way we handle technology, which races ahead of spiritual growth by a long, long distance, we get outpaced by our technology all the time. It's breathtaking. And I do worry, because what we are doing is making it very easy to get in touch with each other in ways that do not add substance or quality to human existence. I think maybe it subtracts a little, and that does concern me. Mm-hmm. Well, for example, here's a good one. How about read a book? I mean, and you're well acquainted with the literary world. Mm-hmm. Books, readership yes, we have a proliferation of books, but we have a diminishing of readership. People won't read the books. They sit on the shelves. Why? Because people are drowning in social media.
Easily, yeah. And it's interesting. Many people don't even keep actual books in their home. I know a couple of people who have gotten rid of every single book that they own so that they can have everything on on Kindle. They're moving everything to Kindle, so having everything electronic. So that's an interesting time when we look at that. I'm kind of old school. I like holding the physical book.
Yes. Yes, I'm definitely in favor of that. And I have my share of Kindle books. They're convenient. They're portable, and they don't add paper. That's true. But sometimes between the covers of a book that I'm holding, maybe next to a lamp late at night, it puts me in a space that I can't get when I'm holding a Kindle. It just feels different. I wonder if that's how people felt when they were getting their information and their entertainment and even their inspiration from radio. And then all of a sudden, with the advent of TV, there were pictures, moving pictures in a little box, and you could look at life going by. Maybe it's something like that. Oh, that seems pretty dramatic when you compare that to books versus Kindle. But there is something satisfying missing when you have a device in your hand as opposed to a book.
When we spoke to our doctor about this, our doctor said you really need to turn your television off about an hour before you're going to sleep. And he explained that when you're watching TV or looking at a tablet, that your brain has to reorganize all the pixels to understand what it is that you're looking at, because you're looking at 1,000 pixels or however many pixels there are. And he said your brain gets very stimulated by the fact that you have to translate. Your brain has to translate those little tiny individual squares into something that makes sense. And even if you're reading a Kindle, you still have the same issue with needing to interpret. Your brain has to interpret the pixels you're looking at. And he said it's different when you have a printed page and your brain is looking at the letters on a printed page. It's a different part of the brain that does not become overly stimulated. So he said if you want to relax to go to sleep, read a book, but not on Kindle, because that's going to wake you up, not put you to sleep. And I thought that was pretty interesting information about how the brain works.
That is interesting information. I mean, and there's so much research that's being done nowadays in regards to improving our brain and being able to just emphasize different parts of our life by retraining our brain. You know, it kind of has me thinking with the two of you and all the guests that you've had, what are some of the dynamic guests that you've also had on the show? I know we listed some earlier, some of the celebrities. What are some of the ones that stick out for you?
We've done, 5 or 6 interviews with James Van Praagh. At least 5 times we've had him on. He's a remarkable man. He gets accused of being a cold reading, phony, not a real medium. There's no such thing. Anyway, the skeptics are all over him. I don't know. He brought some people on when he was taking calls that in a way that indicated to me not only does he have a deep understanding of life, but that he can tap into people's connections with their loved ones on the other side, and he was giving them information very specific to their lives or even their family religious traditions. And this is someone calling up. He doesn't know. It's random. Somebody who called up, and he's telling them these things without asking any leading questions, which is what a cold reader does. People are unfamiliar with the term. If you get somebody who can read faces, for example, or who asks leading questions if they're on the radio and taking calls, there is a way of eliciting information from people just enough in order to weave a general story that kind of sort of sounds like somebody's life and their family connections with their so-called dead relatives. And that's a bad thing. That's bad for metaphysics. It's bad for karma. So there is that. But when I've had dynamic interactions with people who travel the world doing spiritual work, I find that immensely exciting and satisfying.
We're both pretty fascinated by the metaphysical world, by the world that you can't see. And so we do interview psychics and mediums and people who have that ability. But when you're also talking about fascinating guests, what we were saying just before then about the brain and how that works, that also interests me a great deal. And for me, it has a very practical application, because we talk to experts who tell you how you can change your thinking, and in changing your thinking, you can change your life. Now, this involves many religions over the millennia, but now we're talking about psychiatrists and psychologists who have opined that we rarely think a new thought, that we're thinking the same things over and over again every day, that our subconscious is really running the show. And so they talk about what is that small percentage of your thinking, which is actually not reaction to something, but is a standalone thought that you have that's different and not provided for you by television, media, peers, your education, whatever. And so I'm always fascinated by how the mind works and what happens when we sleep and the dream state. So a lot of that stuff really fascinates me. And we've talked to Dr. Dream, Kelly Sullivan Walden. She's coming up on our show again, who has such a great way of dream interpretation. We've talked to Dr. John Ryder, who talks about how to program your brain to go from the negative to the positive, how to take any negative emotion you're having, look at its opposite, and train your brain to be more in touch with the positive aspects of living. And so I like when we talk to these kinds of people who show you how to be happier right here, right now. We don't want to wait till an afterlife to be happy. You want to experience that right now. Well, why don't you have that right this second? What is the difference? Well, it's usually perspective. How do we change our perspective? How do we change our thinking? I like the fact that we're able to do that, because both Gary and I have had instances, those aha moments, where we said, well, why do I think that? Where did that thought come from? And when you stop to examine where a thought came from, you might find out it didn't come from you, it came from somewhere else, and you might want to discard it. If you think that you're not worthy, or you're not beautiful, or that there's something wrong, there is a way to actually turn your thinking around so that you start living a life which is more in alignment with what you want than what you don't want. And all of that fascinates me, Marianne.
Oh, I love that too. I think that those are some just fabulous topics, because when we talk about self-improvement, personal development, self-help, anything that falls within that category, I mean, there's a lot of things that we can do to improve ourselves while we're here.
One of the people that you brought to us was Ken Elliott. And Ken Elliott wrote the book Manifesting 1, 2, 3. It's not a large book, but it is such a significant book, because he talks about how thoughts become physical. He goes through that process in his book, and we've talked to him on the radio several times, because people want to know how to manifest things, and they try a lot of different ways to do it. But he says it's this simple. And he talks about that in a way that you can take that information and use it right here, right now. You don't have to wait for a future time. You just start using it. Those are the kinds of things that I find really, really intriguing. And of course, he has demonstrated that for himself when he figured it out, when he researched it, and he came to a conclusion. he then started doing the exact thing he said could be done. And one of the things that Gary and I laugh about is you never want to take diet information from somebody who's overweight or how to raise children from people who don't have any. Mm-hmm. So, here's a case where this person figured something out, demonstrated it over and over again, and then he's sharing that information. This is what worked for me. You try this. See if this will work for you. But he's got success behind him. He says, this is how it worked for me, and I've been successful. And I like that. I like talking to people who have had a success. They're not just preaching, and they're not talking about abundance and living, homeless under a bridge. They're actually doing the thing that they say can be done. And when they demonstrate it, I'm impressed.
That is an impressive thing. And yeah, Ken is quite gifted when it comes to manifesting, as the both of you are. I mean, we look at the, not just the show that you have, but the array of just very interesting guests. I'm always, looking forward to hearing what your next guest is. And, it's interesting. Dr. Kelly, she's got some amazing information. So I'm looking forward to hearing that as well.
She's got this new Oracle deck out, and we're going to have to play with it in order to have a bit of experience by the time we get to the interview. That's an important thing, to work with your dreams, both the kind you entertain while you're awake, and then, though I'm guilty of letting this lapse, but Suzanne's better about it than me, but keeping track of your dreams overnight, because I don't think it's this chaos that is the more prosaic explanation for dreaming. There is dream work to be done, because you can tell your subconscious mind to work on a given problem. Some dilemma, could be with a person, could be an aspiration that remains unfulfilled. And if you tell your subconscious to work on it, your dreams will tell you what you need to do and where you need to go to achieve what you would like to have in life. I honestly believe that. And also, I've been warned. This is the most dramatic kind, right? But I've had dreams that showed me something very negative in my life that I needed to avoid. And I only got myself in big trouble if I ignored the dreams, figuring it was just a nightmare or a hash of negativity, something chaotic, or even something I ate that night. That's when I get into trouble. When I take my dreams seriously, however, I find that the information is not only useful to me, but tends to tell me a lot about who I really am.
Well, and that's, I think that's such an important message, because a lot of times people get this information and they do kind of write it off. It's like, oh, I had a really spicy dinner. It's probably that. Or, I saw something that is probably bringing that up, without really listening to their intuition about what is happening.
Yes, I found that to be true. About 3 or 4 nights ago, the dream from which I woke up, I was ready to be done with that one. I think I woke myself up. I was in a very serious argument going on. It was a heated exchange with someone who used to be close to me. Lots of unresolved issues, unresolved anger. And in the dream, we decided that we need to do other stuff, but we're going to come back and finish this off and argue some more. And after that started up again, I thought, you know what? I'm done with this. And I woke myself up, and the conclusion I reached was that the concentrated negativity was something that I could withstand, but why should I? There's nothing to be gained. And I figured out from that dream that I can simply let that person go. They say bless and release. I just call letting go of someone. And you release them to their own destiny away from you. As a friend of mine in the Seattle area used to say, you bless and release them to their higher good over there.
Well, that is an important thing too, because a lot of times when people have these conflicts, being able to bless somebody and let them go is a really difficult thing.
I don't always feel like blessing. I'm not in a blessing mood if I feel somebody has done me wrong in a serious way. I don't mean stepped on my toe, but there's a difference between somebody stepping on your toe, for example, and keying your car. Mm-hmm. Okay? I mean, one's an accident and the other one is outright hostility. And so I'm thinking, okay, I'm going to decide who I am in relation to this person. And if it doesn't work for me that we get involved with each other again, I find it easier, maybe with age, but nevertheless, I find it easier to say, life's too short. I'm going to let this person go, and I'm going to do things that I enjoy with people that I enjoy, and that becomes preferential. That's one of the great freedoms in life, when you're in a position where you can prefer to be and to do rather than feeling stuck.
Yeah, there always is choice.
Well, that's including, listen, if things are really rotten for you, you may be stuck with that for a while, but you do have the choice of how you will respond to it. So you're absolutely right.
Yeah, being able to bring that. It's really interesting when we look at conflict and interpersonal conflict. And that's why I'm so appreciative of the show that the both of you have, because you really do have a spiritual outlet for people to get more information so they can move their life forward.
We hope to provide that. Yes. We're not religious dogmas. We like to be open, have a perspective where it isn't exactly come one, come all, but it is, be skeptical, but also look at what is available and consider, does this work for me? Because there is so much available to get behind, and you want to do something which is actually going to bring some joy into your life and some satisfaction into your life. And so we hope to provide some of that.
Well, you both do go over a large range of topics, which is on your website. And I love it, because if I'm feeling like, I want to listen to something about dreams or happiness, or, maybe a life coach, it may be something of the paranormal, you've got it all here, where people just click on it and it takes them immediately to where those shows are at, so they can immediately dive in.
We put it up on social media. If people go to Mantz-and-Mitchell, and we remember the mantz-and-mitchell.com, they can find out who's coming up on our show. So thanks for the mention of that. Mm-hmm. But Marianne, I tell you, I'm a social media freak myself, and I don't have half a dozen different accounts on all these platforms. That's true, but I'm on Facebook several times a day, every day, Twitter as well. And I find that it's a great way of interacting with others and getting the word out about who you are and what you're doing. It's not a great way to pick up verifiable information unless there's a link to an article where you can check out something that is open sourced. But I do find that if you gather information and you think about it and you remain open to intuition, into inspirations that come from a place deep in your mind, maybe from your higher self, as people say nowadays, you're living a whole-brained life. Final word for me is, I tell people, don't be crack-brained. Don't put down the left side of your brain because it's only logical, because it only has this critical thinking faculty. Use it. It's there to be used. And the same goes for your inspirational, artistic, creative mind, the right side of your brain. They're meant to work in harmony in order to make you a whole human being. And if you split that down the middle hemispherically and prefer one side to the other, you're kind of cheating yourself.
I agree with you wholeheartely on that. I think there's almost in some ways too much of a focus in developing the creativity that people do leave, the a part of our brain that needs to be there for critical thinking.
Oh, absolutely. And Ken Elliott, who's a magnificent artist, would be a great example of that. Not only does he have a really fun sense of humor, but he's a beautiful painter of canvases. But he also can reason his way out of a paper bag. You talk to the guy in conversation, he goes from A to B, sequentially on to C, and then he derives his conclusions. But I'm sure he doesn't think that way when he's standing before his easel with a palette of paint and a paintbrush in his hand. That's when he's Ken the artist. He's both of that. He's all of that.
And then some.
He's quite a guy. Anybody who ever gets a chance to meet or work with Ken Elliott is in for a treat.
Well, I'm sure he will appreciate that. I know Ken, and he's a dear friend, and I know he's that you all have become friends as well. So it's nice to be able to have this communication in regards to not just him, but your show. And so, why don't we have you share your website one more time for our listeners that want to connect with you and be part of your community?
Our website is mantz-and-mitchell.com. It's not a little ampersand, it's an A-N-D, mantz-and-mitchell.com.
M-A-N-T-Z and M-I-T-C-H-E-L-L.
There you go. Now you can't miss it. We even spelled it for you.
We're also on the Twitter, @mantz-mitchell, and we always welcome people there, and you can have as many friends. You have no limit on that, so come and join us, and I love to follow people back who take, as I say, the metaphysical view of life, who take their spirituality seriously.
Well, Gary and Suzanne, thank you both so much for taking the time to be on the show with us here today.
Oh, our pleasure.
Real pleasure. We're going to have to return the favor one of these days, Marianne. I can't wait to get you on the other side of the microphone.
I would love to do that, and we're going to have to definitely table that for the new year, which I'm very excited about. Well, thank you both. It's been such an honor to spend this time with you and, of course, to talk about the Mantz-and-Mitchell radio show. Well, we're at the end of our time today. I would like to thank everyone for tuning in. You're listening to Moments with Marianne. And remember, make every moment count.
In a single moment, your life can change. Moments with Marianne is a transformative hour that covers an endless array of topics with the best of the best. Her guests are leaders in their fields, ranging from inspirational authors, top industry leaders, and business and spiritual entrepreneurs. Each guest is gifted and a true visionary, a recognized leader in her own work, and while teaching others to develop, refocus, and grow, Marianne will bring the best guest and sometimes a special surprise. Don't miss this. You never know just which moment will change your life forever. Moments with Marianne airs every Sunday, Monday, Thursday, and Friday at 8 p.m. Eastern and 5 p.m. Pacific Time. Make sure to tune in and visit momentswithmarianne.com for more information.